Welcome to Cinema on a Shelf, a podcast about movies and physical media. My name is Matt, and thank you for spending some time with me instead of watching a movie. I promise I will try to make it worth your time. Welcome to episode number 4, and diving into a little bit of a new mini-series for this podcast. Just like I did with my last episode, which was what I'm calling a label spotlight about the Criterion Collection. This is a little bit of a deep dive into another physical media boutique label, which I've talked about before, something that I really enjoy collecting for. And in this case, something that I am looking forward to discovering. So this series is going to be called Label Discovery. And the whole idea about this is to check out some new physical media labels. To me, something that I don't have in my own collection, something that I have been interested in checking out, or just want to see what this label is all about. I do have experience with a lot of other boutique labels and Blu-ray and 4K and DVD makers. And it's always interesting to me to check out new labels because the boutique label scene is something that I personally, as I mentioned, I really love. I collect a lot for, and I look to them as these purveyors of physical media and movies at home, presenting things like these in a way that are, of the highest quality, of something that is really cared for and curated. It's something that I really enjoy as a collector. And this podcast essentially is going to give me an opportunity to kind of take a bit of a dive, a little bit of a shallow dive, I guess you might say, into discovering some of these new labels. So I think with these label discovery episodes, I want them to fall into something a little bit similar to what I did with the label spotlights with Criterion Collection and other ones going forward. I want to take a little bit of a look at what these companies are, maybe where they're founded, when they were founded, what sort of, masthead or what's the primary function behind them, what is the reason that they exist, what sort of stuff do they put out, a little bit of history behind that, a little bit of what they occupy in the market, where they're from as well, because there's a lot of different regions for Blu-ray and physical media labels to be at. And then kind of have the second half of the episode be about actually diving into some of the titles that I've discovered. So for this episode, I have purchased several releases from this new label and have gone through and watched the films, watched the supplements, kind of gone through and just experienced what they had to offer and offer my thoughts a little bit about them and about the label as a whole and what I might be excited to discover next and what you might potentially find interesting about them if you're new to them as well. For this first label discovery episode, I'm going to be covering the Indicator series from Powerhouse Films. We'll talk a little bit more about this series, Indicator. This is a label that I have seen around for some time now and haven't really ever dove into any of their releases. They are a little bit more difficult to find for me in North America. We'll talk about why exactly that is. But we're going to take a look at this series and what makes it really interesting. And I know it's really intrigued me as I've done some research about them. So I mentioned both the Indicator series and Powerhouse Films. So Powerhouse Films is the company that is behind the Indicator series of physical media. So they were founded in 2016, based in the UK. And like I said, Powerhouse Films is the film distributor that operates the Indicator series of Blu-ray and now 4K UHD discs in their physical media library. Was able to look up a little bit of a description of the company and found was on their LinkedIn page actually, this description of what they do. Founded by industry veterans with a passion for physical media, Indicator publishes an extensive collection of classic and criminally overlooked films mastered from the finest available materials before being expertly encoded for optimum results on Blu-ray. Indicator releases contain lovingly produced and assembled extra features and include new and improved English subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing. Limited editions contain exclusive booklets featuring newly commissioned essays and contemporary interviews, articles, or reviews. So a pretty good statement and summary of what the Indicator series and what Powerhouse Films is looking to do. They mention limited editions in their description, including some exclusive booklets with essays and these sorts of things. They do release limited editions versions initially for everything that they release, before then going about putting out a standard edition, which is essentially the disc and does not include the booklet or maybe any hard case packaging box that it might come in. It's something that I think a lot of companies do, is sort of a limited release. I've seen different numbers with Indicator limited releases, whether it's 3,000, 4,000. I'm not sure if it stays the same each time. But they do release those at first, and then when they are sold out or go out of print, then standard editions are available. They do also utilize spine numbers with their releases, so similar to the Criterion Collection, where they do have somewhere in upwards, I believe, yes, it's just over 400 releases and spine numbers in the Indicator series. So again, really appeals to my collector sensibilities, and I'm sure a lot of other people's as well. In 2016, when they did start, they began releasing quite a few different styles of films, and their first 5 films, the first 5 spine numbers in the Indicator series, will tell you just that. There's all sorts of different films here. We have number 1 being the film Christine, directed by John Carpenter. We have Body Double, directed by Brian De Palma, as number 2. Number 3 is Stanley Kramer's Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Number 4 is To Sir with Love, directed by James Clavell. And number 5 is a film called 10 Rillington Place, directed by Richard Flesher, which I'd actually not ever heard of. And after looking up a little bit about it, it's a film from the early 70s from the UK about a serial killer story, actually a relatively famous serial killer story in the UK and London that I hadn't ever heard of before. And I'm actually quite interested to see that film. I need to look up now exactly how I can go about it, because I believe the Indicator Blu-ray is now out of print, but might be able to find it at some point in time. They initially started out releasing region-free titles. So the Blu-rays that they did for the first several dozen, in fact even longer I guess, of their films were region-free. So they would play in a region A, B, or C Blu-ray player. They don't release DVD versions, or at least the Indicator series doesn't. So they just have the region ABC instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Their first strictly region B release was the film The Swimmer, which was spine number 46. And region B being the European region makes a little bit more sense. Now, as time has gone on, and Indicator has been around now for almost 10 full years, they now do a little bit more of a mix of region B releases and region free releases. Recently, the run of them the last little bit have been region free. They have also been releasing some 4K UHDs, which I've spoken about before. 4K discs are natively region free, so if they have a UK 4K of something, then it would play in any 4K player. But if they did have a special features disc that was a Blu-ray, it would, for the most part in those cases, be encoded as region B. So if you are like me and live in North America and don't yet currently have a region-free player, then you would need to be looking up these region-free titles. And actually, the films that I have looked up later in the episode, they are all region-free. They also do these days, at least showing on their website, both UK and US versions for some of their releases. I haven't quite been able to work out if there is any other difference in these versions other than the region. And even some of the ones that are 4K discs, they do sometimes indicate them as UK versus US, and I believe mostly this has to do with a Blu-ray disc being there with extra supplements and special features. Over the years as well, Indicator has also put out a number of really interesting and really lovely looking box sets as well. And these box sets seem to have a little bit of range to them. A lot of them have some kind of a theme that they're releasing around, like all box sets kind of do. But some of these themes are quite unique in some cases. Some of them are specific to maybe an actor or a director. Some of them are specific to a studio era. I know they've done several boxes of film noir sets from specific Hollywood studios, Columbia Noir, Universal Noir, that sort of thing. They've also done a little bit of a combination of both of those. I know, for example, one of the Region B box sets that they put out at one point in time was called John Ford at Columbia, from a specific time period, and these were a series of 4 films that were directed by the legendary classic Hollywood director John Ford, but they were done at Columbia Pictures specifically, which is not typically who John Ford directed for, but like a lot of directors, he moved around to different studios at that point in time, and they released these 4 films in a box set as the John Ford at Columbia box set. So they have done some sets like this that have a little bit of crossover between either an actor or director and also a specific era or maybe a genre they worked within, or in this case, a studio. In a number of these box sets that they have put out, they also have gone back and released some of the individual films that were in these box sets on their own as a standard edition without the box set. A lot of times when these box sets have gone out of print is when they make some of these films available, or sometimes they go concurrently, but it does give people an opportunity to seek out maybe one film that's in a box set as opposed to having to pay a little bit more to check out maybe some other films they don't like, which I actually really like as a practice for box sets. I do love checking out box sets and things like this myself. A lot of times I love that part of discovering a new film that you maybe had never heard of, but I can completely understand people that are really just looking to check out one film or a favorite film, or are only really interested in maybe one of 5 films in a box set. So with a lot of these ones that Indicator has done as individual standard editions, I do think that's a really nice practice for the consumers and for people to be able to collect more of these films without having to take a chance on a higher price point with other films that they may or may not like. Now, as part of checking out the Indicator series and the line of films that they've done, I was really interested to see if there was any sort of pattern to what they released, or the types of things that they were really interested in picking up for release, being that they really started out as a region-free boutique label. I always find that really intriguing to see what's available to them. A lot of rights to films can be very region dependent, and specifically it looked like a lot of films that they did early on were either UK films or Hollywood US films. In fact, there was a lot of US films in those first 5 that I mentioned that they released. 4 of those 5 are films that were made in Hollywood, and 2 of them at least are sort of quote unquote old Hollywood, a little more in the 50s, 60s, so in the kind of waning years of classic Hollywood. But originally, in looking at the list of films they released, and maybe this is, I don't know if it was the first maybe 75, 80, 100 titles or so that are on the Indicator line, There are a lot of them that are, whether they're US based or UK based, a lot of kind of older classic films that maybe lacked a good version on Blu-ray that they could kind of sink their teeth into and put together some interesting special features, or maybe collect some from previous releases and add to them. And a lot of films that were sort of lesser available films, but from big name directors. The ones I mentioned in their first five: John Carpenter, Brian De Palma, Stanley Kramer. These are filmmakers that are well known over their own eras. But also, in looking at even more of their titles going down the line, you see directors like Otto Preminger, John Huston, Hal Ashby, Blake Edwards, Sidney Lumet, Paul Schrader, Fritz Lang, Mike Nichols, Arthur Penn, Sidney Pollack, Irvin Kershner, Stephen Frears. I'm looking down the line now. There's a lot of these filmmakers that maybe just have some lesser known films that weren't really widely available at the point when they were releasing them. So I think they initially really had a bent of taking these lesser known or maybe lesser celebrated films from directors or from eras that were a little more well known and bringing them to light. And one specifically that I'm going to be talking about in the films that I picked up and viewed for the first time is some little known director named Orson Welles. We'll get back to him. More recently, in the last several years, it appears that Indicator has shifted a little bit in what they have started to announce and release. And these have gone a little bit more into genre titles. There's a good amount of horror films. A lot of these are horror films in some niches. They do keep with some of the UK bent with some of them. So a lot of horror film fans will be familiar with the term Hammer horror, which is really relating to a studio called Hammer Films that produced a lot of films in the UK, a lot of lower budget ones, a lot of films starring actors that they would see over and over again. Christopher Lee is the one that comes to mind for me as being in a lot of these Hammer horror films. They do have a lot of films that seem to fit into either Hammer horror, but like that style of maybe a little bit left of center horror from the 60s, 70s, 80s kind of thing, or even other countries' horror films that maybe are less widely available. And some of these have been collected into box sets. It does seem like actually they also have been doing a lot of box sets recently, whether it's the noir box sets, whether it's horror box sets, whether it's other ones like this. So they have seemed to have a lot of those in certainly the last 100 or so of their releases. Ones that, for me personally, I feel like in looking at their list have known less and less of the films as it's gone on, which speaks a little bit to that genre. Horror movies are not necessarily my bread and butter or something I go searching for, but it looks like a lot of really interesting releases that they have gone with. And even in some of their earlier ones, I'm a big sucker for classic films, and they actually have a number of films that are part of the Indicator series that I have either seen and loved or own on different versions. So some of them that maybe they have gone out of print from Indicator in their region-free versions and have now been released by other boutique labels. I know I have a few of these specifically. The Don Siegel film Charlie Varick is one that popped out to me when I was looking at the Indicator list going, oh, Charlie Varick, I love Charlie Varick. And it's a film that they have available and I think either let lapse or maybe it's a region B. I would have to go back and look at the list again, but several of these films that they have released have gone on to be released by other boutique labels later on, which means they probably have lost some rights, or maybe region A rights versus region B rights. There's probably something in there to do with that. But overall, they have a really interesting diverse list of titles that they have available, and ones that span a lot of different genres, ones that span a lot of different interests, and a lot of, really well-known directors, well-known actors, well-known genres. Some that they've even actually released that are part of other collections that you may have seen or maybe purchased on other labels. I know recently I got the 4K box set version from Criterion of what they call the 4 Renown Westerns, which are all 4 Westerns starring Randolph Scott, directed by Bud Boddicker. And Indicator has a box set of all of those films as well, which I believe they may have actually put out first. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it does seem like all 4 of those films and then some standard versions afterwards were released by Indicator as well as Criterion. Now, Criterion has put theirs on 4K UHD, and the Indicator ones are on Blu-ray. But they have done a few of those where, I know another box set I looked up was one with Marlene Dietrich and Joseph von Sternberg, which looks to be mirroring the Criterion Collection box set from those two as well. So there's probably a little bit of cross-pollination between them, of maybe licensing the special materials and supplements from one to the other. Seems like that happens a little bit with different boutique labels, but they do really have a lineup in the Indicator series that I feel like has probably a little bit of something for just about anybody. And the only thing that potentially would hold you back from checking some of these out is that some of them are going to be Region B. And if you are not an owner of a region-free player, then you're not going to be able to play them, or they're going to be more difficult to, at least seek out, probably. I know the only times I've really ever seen the Region B versions of Indicator stuff in North America is at some smaller stores that specialize a little bit more in import versions. So, in kind of a short summary and my first impressions of checking out Powerhouse Films and Indicator, they seem like a really, really unique label. They seem to do a really good job with what they have. I know, as a reputation of somebody being a collector and hearing about other people that collect and seek out some of these Indicator series titles, they seem to have a very, very positive reputation in the physical media community. So clearly they're doing something right, and they've been doing it since 2016. So been at it for 9+ years now. And you don't stick around in physical media for 9+ years if you are failing at what you're doing. So it looked kind of from all of my initial research that Indicator seemed to be really hitting the mark with what they were doing. So really led me to want to check out their films. So I went about figuring out what movies I wanted to get when I started to undertake this episode. So I think what I would like to do with these episodes is to have at least probably 3 releases that I'm going to check out as part of this discovery process for these podcast episodes. And in this case, I actually was able to pick up 5 in total. Now, for this episode, I'm going to really focus on 3. I have 2 more that I am going to check out kind of later on down the road. I was slowly sort of looking and gathering some titles that I was really interested in. And as part of that, I actually discovered that the Powerhouse Films website was running a sale when I was looking. They had a 3 films for £20 sale, and shipping from the UK into Canada is really not that bad. And because they did have a number of titles that are region free that are available, I decided to pull the trigger. So I did get 3 films directly from Powerhouse Films online, and 2 others I was able to find. One I was actually able to find on eBay, and another one got at one of my local stores that somebody had traded in, and it was a film I was incredibly interested in checking out, so picked it up. So I have 5 Indicator films, three of which I'm going to be talking about with this episode. So when I talk about each of these titles, there's a few things that I'll talk a little bit about with each one, and things that I think people would be interested in to sort of know what are these like with some of these releases, to get a little bit of an idea what Indicator's all about. The three of those things I'm going to talk about is the packaging. So what does the case, what does the artwork, any extra booklets or anything like that. The look, feel, and sound of the film on the disc. So, the restorations, how is it sounding? Is it kind of up to a standard that people would notice or not notice? As I mentioned before, I'm not a big technical person with that, and I don't really get hung up on, no, this is bad, or no, this is really good. I just, I don't necessarily know why, but I'll give you my own impressions of what I feel when I watch these films as far as how it looks and how it sounds. And then also the supplements that are available. Now, with these releases that I have from Indicator as part of this, I only was able to get a hold of standard editions for each of these 5 films and the 3 I'm going to talk about. So I do not have any of the Indicator limited editions in my collection right now. And this means that all of these releases don't have any booklets to them. So normally where I would check out the booklet, read the essays that are part of it, in this case, I don't have those. So maybe there's a follow-up episode that I can look into with maybe checking out some of these Indicator limited editions to see what they're all about. I have seen some of them in stores, some of the region-free ones or the US releases in some of my local places that I go get movies. And even though they haven't been movies I'm super interested in checking out necessarily, I can tell you that just from looking at the packaging and the shrink-wrapped versions that are on the shelf, they look really nice. Really, really nice. And some of those booklets are not very small, so I'm really interested to check one of them out at a future date. But in this episode, all 3 of the films we're going to talk about are just the standard edition. So the 3 films that I checked out were 2 films that I had not ever seen before, and 1 film that I had seen before. In fact, I owned a previous copy on DVD of. So the film that I had seen before is The Lady from Shanghai, directed by Orson Welles from 1947. The other 2 are 2 by filmmakers that I absolutely love and hadn't seen before. We have The Passenger from 1975, directed by Italian filmmaker Michelangelo Antonioni, and Underworld USA from 1961, directed by maverick American film director Samuel Fuller. So I'm going to go one by one through each of these. And just as before, I won't touch on the films too much with each of these. It's going to be a little more about the actual experience of the physical media with them. So starting with The Lady from Shanghai, which is spine number 7 in the Indicator series. So this is a very, very early release of theirs. It is, as I mentioned, it's a film that I had on DVD previously. Pretty bare bones version from Columbia Pictures at that point in time. And it's not 100% sure what all it had. I believe maybe it had one conversation with someone that is involved with some of the supplements on the Indicator one. But to give you a bit of a rundown of what's available, you have the film that has gone through a 4K restoration. And in the supplements, you have a commentary track with director Peter Bogdanovich. You have an interview with actor and film scholar Simon Callow about the film. You have a very brief interview with one of the film's stars, Rita Hayworth, for French television. And then you have another interview discussion with Peter Bogdanovich, who, if you've ever seen anything with Orson Welles, you probably know that Peter Bogdanovich was quite good friends with Orson Welles, even though he's quite a bit younger than him. He became friends with him through, I believe, the 60s and 70s as Bogdanovich was getting into making his own films, and really became quite not only a good friend, but a scholar of Orson Welles' work. So because Orson directed and starred in this film, Peter Bogdanovich is probably the closest thing to an authority as we have on some of the perspectives that Orson Welles had in some of the making of these, other than maybe archival interviews and footage from the man himself. So to start with this one, the packaging for the film is really, really fun. It actually draws from a classic poster for The Lady from Shanghai. Little bit of a a cropping, I guess you would say, of the parts of the poster to fit in with the overall Indicator packaging. I will actually say Indicator does have a little bit of consistency in their packaging. Specifically, they have their own sort of graphic at the top of all of their releases, at least on the front cover, with sort of a spectrum of colors running from the violet on the left all the way to the red on the right, with Indicator in white, kind of in the top right of it. It's a nice little piece of branding from Indicator, actually. Quite enjoy it. Makes it quite distinctive as far as the look goes. But yeah, it utilizes this classic poster from The Lady from Shanghai. It does also use kind of the typeface or the font style from the poster on the back of the packaging to show a quote from the film, which is quite interesting. I really, it's a very nice touch, actually. And, other than that, on the inside, there's a little bit of visuals on the inside of the artwork that you can see through the clear case. But no booklet with this one, but a really nice, clean, artsy kind of packaging for a classic Hollywood film like this. As far as the film itself goes, it really does look very, very good. This is a really nice restoration. Feel like restorations of classic black and white films, they just make them look so good. Like, just as a general rule, if you have a decent print of any of these films, the technology is really wonderful on an old black and white film. This one is no different, despite a lot of Orson Welles' films being in probably at different points in their life cycles, a little bit in disrepair because of various cuts, and he fought against studio control and that sort of thing. It's sort of the it's the MO of Orson Welles in his career. But this film really does look quite spectacular. It's especially near the end of the film when a lot of the visual confusion that comes about with the story. If you've ever seen the film, a little bit about what I mean, in that it's a very twisty, turny, noirish type of film, and the ending specifically really kind of dials up the chaos and some of the absurd visuals of it actually ends in like a crazy house, like an amusement park fun house, crazy house type of thing. Hall of Mirrors at the end, in an incredibly famous and really, really brilliant sequence in the ending of the film. It looks really, really nice. The all the sound is really quite clear. Nothing about it that you would say, oh, it maybe isn't quite up to snuff like an older transfer, even though this was one of the first ones they had ever done. Looks great, really does. Of the 3 Indicator releases that I checked out, this is the one probably with the leanest amount of supplements, which, considering the fact that there is an audio commentary and 3 different interview discussions in it, it's not so bad, really. And I can actually say one thing across the board is that I'm really, really impressed with the supplements that Indicator has been able to put on all of their releases. But they do really provide an interesting context to the film. And the discussion with Peter Bogdanovich is about 20 minutes or so long. It is a really nice kind of retrospective into some aspects of the film and of Orson Welles, and working with Rita Hayworth, who at the time he was married to when they were making this film. So there's a lot at play there. There's also a lot at play with the time in Orson Welles' career where he was coming off Citizen Kane, and obviously it now is a huge hit and highly acclaimed, but at the time was quite a flop because it was blocked by William Randolph Hearst, who the film is ostensibly about. And, his next film, The Magnificent Ambersons, was mangled by the studio and edited without Orson Welles' consent and kind of destroyed from what his original vision would be, and kind of set him on this journey of really like fighting for his own original vision of the film and the studio's not having any of it, and him fighting that and basically releasing versions of the film that he wasn't happy with. The Lady from Shanghai is one of those. He wasn't fully happy with the way the film was when it was released, and would kind of set him further onto a journey of being a bit more of an outsider that people in Hollywood didn't really want to work with. So Bogdanovich does a really, really good job of speaking about this. So does Simon Callow on his feature. It's a little bit of a shorter feature, but I really like Simon Callow. In fact, if this interview with him was 2 or 3 times longer, I would have been perfectly happy to sit and listen to him. He's very knowledgeable as both an actor and someone who is kind of a student of film like he is. The interview with Rita Hayworth is interesting. She's speaking some French and some English because she, I think, lived for a lot of her later life in France. But it's maybe a little bit more of like a nice little nostalgic thing than something super informative. I did check out bits of the commentary with Peter Bogdanovich, and just knowing who he is, I have seen him speak about Orson Welles a lot of different times, and this would be something that I probably would be interested to go back to check out in full. But, the small bits and pieces, I definitely checked out his commentary for the ending sequence. And it's really nice. Peter is a very knowledgeable scholar as well as film director, so has a lot of really interesting context that he can bring to something like that. So for a quote unquote smaller release, at least from the supplements of Indicator, The Lady from Shanghai is a really, it's a really interesting film to watch, and what they've added to their physical media release it does a really nice job of giving you a little bit more under the surface. Maybe not a full deep dive, but a lot of really nice things to kind of satiate your appetite as a film nerd like we all are. So the second Indicator release that I was able to check out is Michelangelo Antonioni's The Passenger. This is spine number 49. Now, if you know or have seen any of Antonioni's films before, you probably know a little bit of the kind of film you're getting into. He's part of a movement in Italy that was known as neorealism, and a lot of his films are very deliberately paced. If you're not ready for something that is a little bit slower and a little bit more patient, it's probably going to be a little bit jarring. You might think, well, why where's all the action in this movie? When that's really not the point of an Antonioni film. This film was actually made in English. This is one of the few films that Antonioni made in English, and it stars Jack Nicholson as the main character. And it was the first time he had ever worked with Antonioni. There's also some other English-speaking actors. Maria Schneider is in this film as well, playing a French girl that Jack Nicholson meets a little bit later on. Also stars Jenny Runeker, who is a British actress, and a few other kind of smaller bit parts as well. But I love Antonioni films. La Ventura was my gateway drug to getting into his films. And I love the style. So I was incredibly interested to check out The Passenger because somehow I had never seen it. It's one of the few of his films that I hadn't seen up to this point. And again, I won't necessarily gush about a film, but this was a wonderful film. Very interesting, very deliberately paced. It has a whole story going on about a person that is looking to sort of escape their own life. He's a journalist, a filmmaker, trying to get a documentary made in Africa, and has a series of events that kind of set him in a certain direction that does not exactly go as he thinks it will. And it's the kind of film that as you watch it, you think, oh, if this were a Hollywood movie, this would look very, very different. But Jack Nicholson's really given the opportunity to not do the normal Jack Nicholson thing and really go for it and like be really overacting's the wrong word, but if you've seen a Jack Nicholson movie, you kind of get an idea of what he does. He's a very type A personality in a lot of his films. And in The Passenger, he is really allowed to just exist and allowed to react and allowed to be silent in a lot of it for what he's doing. So if that sort of style of film is something you're interested in, check out all of Antonioni's films. But Passenger's really interesting. And this package in this film does a really incredible job of providing some interesting context because Antonioni's not with us anymore. He passed away a number of years ago. But we have a whole bunch of context to go with this film. So on this release, we have 3 different audio commentaries. We have one from Jack Nicholson. We have one with screenwriter Mark Peplow and a journalist named Aurora Irvine, and another one by film historian Adrian Martin. There is also a couple of archival interviews, one with Jenny Runeker, I mentioned, one of the actors, and another one with actor Steven Berkoff, who has more of a bit part in this film, but talked about how he came to get the part and working with Antonioni. Steven Berkoff was also a director himself and did some theater and things like that, so he was involved in the industry in a lot of ways and had some interesting insights about that. Then there's also several interview pieces, edited pieces that have archival footage of Antonioni himself, including an interview at the Cannes Film Festival where The Passenger premiered, and also a little bit of a lengthier one about the final sequence of the film and an analysis of it. And I'm not here to discuss the film, but I will tell you as a little bit of a teaser that not the very, very final shot, but the final sequence in The Passenger is very well known as being one of the most jaw-dropping scenes that I know personally. I was floored. Like I had no words as I was watching it. It is his trademark slow and deliberate style with camera movements, and basically at the end of it, I couldn't believe what I was watching. Quite literally, how was this shot done? It was also incredibly magnetic, and it was near the end of the story, and it is one of the most jaw-dropping finales to a film I've ever seen in my life. And this analysis that he did of this final sequence does, he's watching rushes of this scene basically, and talks a little bit about the how exactly, they made that shot work as it did. So it's a little bit of quote unquote inside baseball, to go with a colloquial term for that, but really, really interesting. And as an entire package, this is a really in-depth look at this film. And his films have always been great fodder for deep dives and for analysis and audio commentaries. It does not surprise me at all that there's 3 audio commentaries on this disc. I did only check out one of the audio commentaries, the one that I was kind of most interested in, which was Jack Nicholson's audio commentary. It's really good. Jack has, I think he really enjoyed his time working on this film because it was quite different than a lot of stuff he was doing. Maybe a little closer to something like Chinatown, which had come out the year before this. But, it's a very interesting commentary track. It's almost like Jack Nicholson soft speaking his way through it. Like if you ever wondered what Jack Nicholson doing an ASMR video is like, it's kind of like this commentary. He's very soft spoken. I don't know if it had to do with the time of day that it was, but he was just speaking, very methodically, didn't have a lot of rushed feelings. It was very interesting because it's not the Jack Nicholson that I think a lot of us would be used to seeing in an interview or certainly in an acting role. But Yeah, it was really really taken aback by what was on this film. Packaging wise, again, it is also utilizing a version of one of the international posters for the front artwork. The look, feel, and sound, this film sounded wonderful. Sound does play a little bit of a role in this film in that it's quite subdued, but what's there is really interesting. The look and feel of this film, and I think this has to do a lot with how it was shot and the era that it was in, because it does feel very intentionally kind of grainy and blurry's the wrong word for it, but it definitely feels like it was shot on a handheld camera through a lot of parts of Africa and in other parts of Europe that doesn't necessarily lend itself to the sharpest of 4Ks. In fact, I'm not sure what a 4K version of The Passenger would do if it would really enhance it. I'd be very interesting to check that out, because the presentation as it was really suited this film very much. So yeah, it was a very big fan of this release. So the third release that I checked out from Indicator is the Sam Fuller 1961 film Underworld USA, which seems like a very generic title, and it kind of is, but kind of works really well for this film. It is a lower budget film noir that Sam Fuller was certainly known for doing in that period of the late 50s, early 60s. It is spine number 79 in the Indicator line. And as a film, again, very interesting, very, if you're familiar with Sam Fuller's films, and specifically other films maybe like Pick Up on South Street, this has a very similar feel to that sort of noir. Very, very gritty, very unflinching. You don't go looking for a lot of likable characters necessarily in this film. There are not a lot to be found, to be honest with you, and it is pretty unflinching look at underground crime specifically, and about the main character whose father is a small-time criminal who is killed by sort of four unknown to him other people involved with organized crime. And he discovers his father and basically vows as a young child to kill the four men that killed his father. And he grows up very, very quickly, kind of stays as a bit of a small-time hood himself who is in and out of prison, but never really wavers on wanting to get his revenge on these men, to first of all figure out who these people are and then get his revenge on them. So the setup is kind of pure pulpy noir that Sam Fuller does so well. And it's clearly a film that a lot of people like, even though it's not maybe the most commercially successful. The studio wasn't really propping this film up for a lot of awards or prestige, but it really found an audience with that film noir, hard-bitten crime drama. And this is evidenced by the special features that are on here. So to give you a bit of an idea again about the packaging with this one, this does utilize again a classic film poster. Even though the film's in black and white, the poster is in color. It's actually quite striking as far as the use of color. It does look a little bit like there's a faded brick wall with shadows behind it, which is actually a very striking image that comes directly from the film. And it's a nice little piece of packaging for sure. I do really like when I see some of the older Hollywood poster style, with the hand drawn artwork of maybe of a real person or of a scene like this. This is a really nice painting of a really famous scene from the film. So really like that as a style. I'm happy they've kept it up for this release. Similarly to The Lady from Shanghai, this is, like I said, an older black and white noir film, and it's gone through a high definition remaster. And again, it really does look really good. You really cannot tell looking at this version of the film that this was ever a quote unquote lower budget film, which at that point in time, they were all getting shot on very similar cameras. So the look and feel, is less of a thing that you would see if, oh, this is a low grade camera. No, it was still made, in the Hollywood system. So the restoration really does look very nice. It serves the film really well. It's not a film where sound necessarily plays a huge role in it, but it is noir, and the look and feel and the shadows and some of the darker scenes do look really, really nice. So I think the presentation is serving the film very well here. And the performances in the film are also aided by a lot of really big close-ups in this film. Sam Fuller is known for certain shots in his movie being quite close up, like almost uncomfortably so. And the actors' faces and everything they're showing does look really good. A lot of really interesting perspective shots here, and the presentation for all of it is really, really nice. The supplements that are available on this release, there is a short interview with director Martin Scorsese. You might have heard of him before. He's a noted big fan of Samuel Fuller and of this era of B film or lesser known films. There is a critical analysis video with author Barry Forshaw, who is the author of a book called American Noir. So he is very, very qualified to talk about this as a genre, and obviously Samuel Fuller's place in that genre. There is a just slightly over an hour long audio conversation as well. It's very interesting to see audio conversations as part of a Blu-ray release. I guess it's like the precursor to podcasts, maybe. It may not be a precursor, I guess, but this is an audio conversation between Sam Fuller and German director Wim Wenders, and they're billing it as a bit of a Sam Fuller masterclass, where they're really having a back and forth discussion about how Sam Fuller made films. And if you've ever seen or heard Samuel Fuller discuss filmmaking, he is what's the right term? Sam Fuller is a storyteller. And even when he is talking with someone one-on-one, or talking directly to a camera in an interview, or in a discussion with several people, Sam is a weaver of stories. He is engaging. He's usually has a cigar hanging out of his mouth. He's a former World War II veteran, in fighting in the infantry. So he has an incredibly interesting backstory. Got into the movie making business very, very late in his life. He wasn't one of these people that got in when he was young. So he brought this very interesting life experience to making films that a lot of people didn't have. And this is why so many of his movies are very unsettling, unflinching, discussing subject matter that's maybe a little bit more taboo in a very frank way. Films like The Naked Kiss and Shock Corridor really dive into some topics that were at that point people didn't want to touch at all. He's an incredibly enigmatic figure, and this audio discussion with Wim Wenders is really wonderful. It's so dynamic to listen to, and if you enjoy listening to that, then you are probably also going to love the longest supplement on this disc, which is 212 minutes. You heard that right. Of unedited archival footage of Sam Fuller talking to Tim Robbins, the actor, for a documentary called The Typewriter, the Rifle, and the Movie Camera. And these are what they call rushes, where they're just kind of raw footage of them shooting different parts of these conversations. And some of this footage actually runs past the filmed footage. So they're filming for this documentary. But sometimes Sam just kept talking, they cut the film, but he just kept going on and on and on. So sometimes it was truncated. Sometimes they had to stop a story halfway through and then come back to it. Sometimes they just kept the audio rolling. So there's bits of watching this footage on the Blu-ray where you just don't see anything on screen. But Sam Fuller, he's not stopping. He is still talking away and talking away and talking away. And it's it's hilarious having, seen Samuel Fuller talk in different ways. It's like, this is exactly who he is. But I mean, like 212 minutes of listening to Sam Fuller, I'm sure if I had ever met the man in real life and was just shooting the shit with him, pardon my language, I would have stayed for at least 212 minutes, if not more. And it did really actually make me want to search out this documentary, The Typewriter, the Rifle, and the Movie Camera, which, he talks about his life in film. He talks about his life at war. He talks about, the life of a soldier. He made a lot of films about soldiers, the Steel Helmet, the Big Red One. I'm missing a bunch of others here as well, but he had a very unflinching, way of talking about soldiers and describing not only them, but the trauma that they all went through in the war and what it was really, really like to be an infantry soldier. And man, it's really, he's so dynamic in the way he talks about it. And it's a little bit rambly, and it's a little, if you've seen Sam Fuller talk before, you know what I mean in this sort of style. But this is a wonderful, wonderful supplement that goes far, far beyond just Underworld USA as a film, which as a film, it's a really interesting watch. It's a little shorter watch. It's the shortest of these three films. And if you like film noir, you probably will find a lot to love in Underworld USA. It has some really, really wonderful performances from Clifford Robinson, from Dolores Doran, from Beatrice Kay, some other bit supporting parts. Yeah, it is a lot to love in this film. And this is a really, really well packaged set of supplements to go with this film. I could only imagine also having a booklet in the limited edition to go with it. They would have, for this kind of a film and this kind of a release, it's really impressive. And it was a really, really entertaining deep dive after the film. So highly, highly recommend this release if you're a film noir fan. Most certainly, there's a lot to love in the three of these. The other two films that I mentioned that I did pick up that I have not had a chance to look at, that I will be checking out after this episode for myself, is William Wyler's The Collector, starring the great Terrence Stamp, who unfortunately recently, earlier this year, passed away very suddenly. Samantha Eggar is also in it, award-winning actress. And I've heard some very interesting things about that film. More recently than anything, I don't know if there's another revival or another release coming out at some point. Maybe they're doing some kind of a reissue, I'm not sure. But really interested to check that one out. And the other one that I have is Suddenly Last Summer, the Joseph Mankiewicz film starring Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, and Katharine Hepburn in an adaptation of a Tennessee Williams play. This is a film that I've heard about for a really long time. I think I first heard about it from watching the documentary The Celluloid Closet, and hearing Gore Vidal talk about working on that film and some of the portrayals of certain characters being very of the time, but very, very interested to check it out. Sounds like a very controversial film for the time it was released. So based on what I have seen from these other Indicator releases, I'm really looking forward to checking more out. Which, is going to lead me into a little bit of my own evaluation of discovering this label. So on the whole, Indicator as a Blu-ray label, and all three of the films I did check out, like I said, are region-free Blu-rays. I haven't checked out any of their 4Ks as of yet. Maybe that's coming down the road. But overall, what I found with all three of the releases I checked out is that I was really, really impressed with the supplements that were available with all three of them. I think they paid really, really nice attention to, for the most part, finding supplements that were going to provide interesting context to the film, that were going to include people that were really knowledgeable about the film or the filmmakers or the processes, the time periods in one way or another. And also, the fact that all of them, I guess, other than Underworld USA, had audio commentaries, which, even though I'm not the world's largest audio commentary person, about checking them out. I often will do it maybe on a second or third revisit to a film down the road, maybe a year or two later. But I really like having a lot of them. The 3 commentaries on The Passenger, that's outstanding. That it is really, really excellent stuff. And for a film like that I really, really love, and a filmmaker I really love, I'm sure there is an absolute ton of great stuff in the other 2 commentaries that I haven't checked out yet. And in Underworld USA's case, where there isn't a specific commentary, 212 minutes plus an hour-long masterclass with Sam Fuller is more than enough to compensate for no commentary on the disc. Like I said, the look and feel and sound of everything was really nice, presented really well. I like the use of older artwork with everything. And in looking at the other 2 films, The Collector and Suddenly Last Summer, both utilize that same idea of older poster art that they're repurposing. For some of the other newer releases from Indicator that I've seen in stores, that they do also utilize a lot of that kind of hand-drawn stylings, or things that you could tell were very clearly pulled from an artistic poster for the film at some point in time. So I really like their style as far as the packaging look and feel of a front cover goes. And the other limited edition things, I will have to check out more of. In fact, I'm quite interested to check out more of the Indicator series, and maybe even it in the near future. I'm hoping to be able to get my hands on a nice region-free 4K player to go back and dive into some of these non-region A releases, and Indicator seems ripe for that. They seem to have a lot of really interesting releases in region B, and it's going to be a slippery slope if I go down that way of comparing supplements on one to supplements on another. And maybe that's an idea for a podcast in the future of what happens when you get 2 releases of the same film with different features on them. But my initial discovery and impression of the Indicator series and of what Powerhouse Films is doing with them, really, really positive. And I'm really happy to have these in my collection and to start to be able to dive into them a little bit more. It's really fun to see what a new label is doing. Anytime I pick up something by a new boutique label, it's nice to see their own stamp on things, and Indicator's doing a great job. That is my thoughts about Indicator. Overall, I think this was a really, really successful label discovery for me, and look forward to doing more of these. In fact, I have a list. It's a growing list of labels that are new to me. In fact, if you have a favorite boutique Blu-ray and 4K label that you think is worth checking out, I would absolutely love to hear about it. So I do have an Instagram going for the podcast at Cinema on a Shelf. I also have, all of these episodes are up on YouTube, and I would love to see YouTube comments. In fact, it's really nice to see some people that have had some really positive reaction to previous episodes. They do also try and post episodes on Reddit as well, anywhere where you can find movie podcasts or boutique Blu-ray discussions. I'm there, Cinema on a Shelf. And also, I do have a Letterboxd account. It's my own personal one, at Maddie236. If you're interested in what I'm watching, I log everything that I watch there. I also put tags in there if I'm watching a specific Blu-ray or a boutique label. I usually will put a tag in there as well. So any of those places, I would love to hear about what labels I should be checking out next. Maybe some of your favorite releases from Indicator. If you're a longer time collector than I am, I would love to hear your thoughts on what you have for Indicator, what you love about Indicator. I'm always looking for more tips on what more to get, so maybe some recommendations on what I should be checking out next from Indicator. Thank you very much for listening to this little little self-discovery journey through a new boutique label, and more to come in the future. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.